All right, if I can get the panelists for the next session to make their way up here. I know there was a lot of numbers real fast in a short period of time. But just so you guys know, tomorrow there'll be a breakout session on the power of partials. So if you want to learn more, check your little pocket agenda or the app and see what time it is. I think it's in room number 2. So take a look at that. Martha Speed will be conducting that. It's the power of partials tomorrow afternoon. And then later this afternoon, we're going to have Mitch Stephen up here talking about seller financing. So it'll kind of combine both of these exit strategies that we just talked about. So traditionally, here comes Glenn. Come on, Mr. Lee. Traditionally at NoteExpo, what we do is we try to get you guys an update on what's going on Capitol Hill and some of the efforts of the Seller Finance Coalition and what we're doing to kind of curb some of the regulations that we're faced with. And it's always good when we're in a period of time when it's election time, because it's always a moving piece at that point in time. Because whatever we've been working on for the past 2 years will all reset next Tuesday, because there'll be new congressional people in there, and that could change committee structures and so forth. So I want to introduce the lobbying firm that's behind all of our efforts for 4 years now, 5?
Feels like a lot more.
It does feel like a lot more. This is Matt Keelan, and then I'm joined up here with some of the other founders of the Seller Finance Coalition. You all know Eddie Speed. This is Glenn Lee, and everybody knows Mr. Jeff Watson. So I'm going to let Matt kind of moderate. First, why don't you give us an update, Matt, on kind of what's going on, and if we can grab that stick mic, give that to Glenn so he can participate. And why don't we kind of bring folks up? We've got about 45 minutes, and we'll bring them up to date on what's going on, and then give them some tips on how they can help support us in grassroots efforts.
Excellent. Quick update. Not a lot's going on in Washington, D.C. these days. It's been pretty slow. No craziness.
It's a joke.
Yeah. Actually, quite the opposite. I've never seen it more crazy than it has been over the last, I would say, year and a half, but particularly over the last 2 months. The Kavanaugh hearing. How many people in the audience viewed any of that? It was one of the biggest circuses that's come to town in Washington, D.C., in a town full of circuses. And it kind of sapped all the energy out of the room for anything else that was going on legislatively. You know, next Tuesday, this Tuesday coming up, is Election Day. That too has taken out a lot of the energy for legislating or any policy making until after that is concluded. A lot of folks are looking at the election to see how the next 2 years of the Trump administration are going to shape up. The first 2 years, obviously, he had a Republican House and a Republican Senate to work with. They've gotten a couple of big pieces of legislation done, like the tax reform bill. We'll see what happens on Tuesday. Most people are predicting a mixed result, which is that the Democrats will take the House and Republicans will pick up seats in the Senate. And we're being told by some people, in fact, Nancy Pelosi said last night, that if they win, then they'll start ratcheting down their rhetoric, which seems to me to be kind of an interesting strategy. But Maxine Waters, who I'm sure many people in the audience have heard of, would then be the chairwoman of financial services. Interestingly enough, she and her people have put out in the last, I'd say, 10 days, kind of a way to start working with the business community, saying, you know, Maxine's not as radical as she's painted. She wants to work with people. She wants to work with Republicans on the committee, and we could do things in a bipartisan fashion. She has operated in some instances in a bipartisan fashion over the last couple of years. Most people see her on TV talking about impeachment and some other more polarizing things. But there is some hope in D.C. that she will try to work with industry and try to make some changes to Dodd-Frank that Republicans and Democrats can agree upon. As I'm sure most people in the audience know, there was a Dodd-Frank fix bill that was done earlier this year. It was something that primarily Senate Democrats were really in charge of because they voted along with the Republican majority to make those changes. So it had to be something that garnered at least 9 Democrat Senate votes. So those Democrat senators hold a lot of sway in that. But it does show you that there is at least an acknowledgement in a bipartisan fashion that that bill needs to be tweaked and changed, and there are a lot of unintended consequences to that piece of legislation that went through, and I think that's one of the reasons why we're here today. The Seller Finance Coalition started because of those unintended consequences. As those of you who have heard me speak before know, when Dodd-Frank was being debated and put together, the Seller Finance Coalition did not exist. As they say in Washington, D.C., if you're not sitting around the table, you are being served on the table. And we were served on the table because there was no one there to defend our industry. That is not the case anymore. And not only are we defending it in Washington, D.C., but we've been pretty active in Austin and some other state capitals as well. These guys are kind of the intellectual heft behind seller financing, and then you wonder why we're having the troubles we're having. May I present you the intellectual heft behind the Seller Finance Coalition? But Glenn Lee was really the guy who came to me and said we need to have a voice and help get it kicked off. So I wanted to ask Glenn, you've put more time and effort into this than just about anybody I know, and maybe combined than most folks. What do you think of the effort so far, and how could we be doing things better?
First thing is that I had a full head of hair before Dodd-Frank and the SAFE Act. Beyond that, but I thought it was the best business in the world. That you could have your own business and control it. I'd rather have that than any other profession. And I've been successful since the 80s with that. And then along comes regulation. And I did what I thought I should do, and that's get the license. Well, the license is intended for the mortgage business. I mean, first of all, I had to go. Is anybody else in here licensed? How many? Not many. Had to go to a 20 hours of education, and that was all one weekend, and it had nothing to do with our business. It was all about the mainstream mortgage business. But anyway, I did it, and then I took the test and managed to pass that. And then a little later, I get a letter that I'm being audited. So in comes the guy from the state. The first thing he asks is, why do you not have your hours posted outside? I said, well, I'm in an office building. They don't let you do that. So it went downhill from that. So I kept the license for 2 years. And my story is that we've just moved away to more commercial type lending, and that's not good. That's not what we wanted to do. So out of frustration, we got together with these guys and started the coalition. And there's a lobbyist in Texas named Wayne T. Frankie who was recommended to us. Well, we talked to him, and then he said, well, hey, I know the best in the business. So that's where Matt Keelan came in. So I'll leave it at that. As you know, that was the rest of the story at that point.
Well, the man who's logged more steps on Capitol Hill than anybody in the room, including myself, Bob Repass, has been back several times this year. What do you think about the progress that we've made this year, and what could we be doing better as a coalition, both in D.C. but also with our membership?
Well, earlier in the year, we were very encouraged. We had our bill introduced to the Financial Services Committee. It was going to be sent for markup, which basically means they debate it over the table. They decide if everything meets what enough people can vote on to pass, and it just getting pushed down the road. And it turned from encouraging to frustrating. And part of it was just the natural gridlock that's there. And They want as many bipartisan sponsors as you could have. So we would hit Capitol Hill several times a year, try to get as many Republicans and Democrats that are on the Financial Services Committee to be co-sponsors. And we did a pretty good job of that. We ended up with 23 co-sponsors at the current time, along with our initial sponsor, Roger Williams. So we've been making some progress. We actually have our two original sponsors, one's a Republican and one's a Democrat. So we were making good progress there. At the same time as we were kind of floundering in the Financial Services Committee, we wanted to get a similar bill going on the Senate side. So we spent the last few months trying to get some action going on the Senate side, which would be a comparable bill. And we've got a couple people on the Senate side that are on the Banking Committee that we've been working with, and we've made great strides with Senator Tom Cotton out of Arkansas, and we've been trying to reach out and get something going with Senator Doug Jones from Alabama, who's a Democrat, but he's also on the Banking Committee. And I'm going to get Jeff here in a minute to kind of speak to some of the grassroots effort. But I guess what really changed for the Seller Finance Coalition was after we were doing this for almost a year, we got the National Association of Realtors, the National RIA Club, on board as one of our members. So not only do we get Jeff, who's the general counsel for them, and Charles Tassel, who I believe is chief operating officer, but we have their 40-some thousand members who are also part of the coalition. So now when you go in and talk to somebody and they ask you, we can tell you we're in 44 states, we have over 40,000 members, and all of a sudden, you know, you're not just, you know, a few guys from Texas and Ohio trying to change the world. So that was really the impetus that kind of put us over the edge. And Jeff, you're always very opinionated on the grassroots effort and how people can help us. And I promised I was going to let you kind of tell everybody how you've used the National RIA and kind of some of the efforts that we were able to accomplish by just pushing out information to folks and getting them involved with sending letters and emails to their representative.
I didn't know I had opinions.
You're an attorney.
Well, okay, that was a joke, and it obviously didn't make it past the stage. All right. As General Counsel of National RIA, it was a very easy fit for me to go back to my client and say, this is a organization that we've got, this is an effort that we've got to support. Because at the same time that National RIA was getting on board with Seller Finance Coalition, we were slugging it out in the halls in Columbus, Ohio on some legislation impacting real estate investors. And we won there, and we won there because we get people involved. And I'm looking at each and every one of you and telling you that you can be involved in many different ways. The first is on Tuesday, vote. Find out who is on your ballot that is in favor of real estate investors. The second thing you can do is encourage your friends and families to vote in favor of people who are supporting real estate investing. And there's a particular race that is pretty close that I'm just going to tell you guys, there's another thing you can do, and that's pray for it. There's a race in the state of Kentucky with one of our co-sponsors, Andy Barr. They're really going after him because he's a really good guy for us. And the other party's going after him. And anything you can do in the state of Kentucky, if you got friends in that district that are represented by Congressman Barr, he deserves to be reelected. We've also got some guys in the state of Texas, 3 of them that need to be reelected in Texas: Roger Williams, Henry Cuellar, and Vicente Gonzalez. I was afraid I was going to blank on that name. And by the way, names I've mentioned are both D's and R's. So there's things you can do. Tell your friends, vote. There's other things you can do, and that is tell other people that you're voting and why you're voting for someone. You're not voting for someone because of a negative attack. You're voting for someone because they support real estate investors. That helps real estate agents, brokers, realtors, and investors. So it's important to have that grassroots effort. The second thing, the last thing you can do in a grassroots perspective is phone calls and emails to your members of Congress, specifically asking them. So when National RIA got on board, we brought in something called Voter Voice. that is an online tool that you can, from the comfort of your fuzzy pajamas and slippers at home, log on and send an email. We'll give you a draft of what to say to your representatives about supporting H.R. 1360, which is the Seller Finance Enhancement Act. And every piece of communication is just more and more drop of water eventually going to break through on this stuff. So those are things that you can do. The last thing you can do if you're so inclined is to pray. Pray for this country. Pray that the right people will be elected or reelected on Tuesday. And pray that we can be good citizens with all of the responsibilities we've been given in this great, wonderful republic.
Wow. So, Eddie, you're the guy that probably talks to the most people, touches the most industries. If we are successful in passing this bill, what will it mean to the folks in the room and into the different industries that you're dealing with?
Well, related to seller financing, if we look at the real estate investor community, and I think probably this room probably has still the same numbers, 95% of the people in this room will be now relieved of Dodd-Frank. Not 100% of the people in the room, but 95 of them will. And that's an incredible number, and we just absolutely think that if the small real estate investor, the guy that does less than 25 transactions a year with owner financing, if he can get away from the regulatory environment, counselor, of Dodd-Frank, it just frees him up to do business. It still requires that they qualify a customer. We're not going back to Wild West seller financing, but it's fair and it's equitable. They don't have the expense of it. Right. They don't have the burden of being not compliant with Dodd-Frank and the legal burden of that. And it's just a game changer for seller financing, I think, if that happens.
Yeah, let me just kind of clarify and tee it up so everybody kind of knows what we're talking about. Jeff mentioned H.R. 1360 and what the bill is. Before the SAFE Act and Dodd-Frank, there was an unlimited number of seller finance transactions that you could do, right? If you had 100 houses and you could find 100 buyers, you could do 100 seller finance loans. And as Matt mentioned, when Dodd-Frank came and they just threw an umbrella over everybody and we weren't there to say, whoa, that really doesn't pertain to us, we got caught under this umbrella of regulatory requirements, which states if you do more than 3 in a 12-month period, then you have to be licensed as if you were Bank of America, Wells Fargo, or whoever else. Well, to Glenn's point, for the small real estate entrepreneur that's been an investor creating seller finance for 30 years prior to that, doing whatever he could, whether it was 3 a year or 33 a year, that was a big endeavor. Anybody who's been in a corporate world, whether it's a bank or any other kind of corporate environment, you know when you got audit and general counsel, it's expensive. So what we were trying to do is we were trying to get some relief. All right, we went from unlimited to 3, okay? That was pretty much a shock. And believe me, I've been in, I can't even count how many offices now. And when we tell them this story, they go, really? You used to do it all you want, now you can only do 3? They almost laugh at you. Like, how did you let that happen? You know, and we're like, well, we weren't around back then and we need to get it changed. So we did a lot of negotiating with the National Bankers Association, the Realtors Association, the community banks. What could everybody live with? And, you know, at first it was very, we'll say, contentious. They were like, hey, if we got to follow it, you got to follow it. And I was like, whoa, you know, we try to explain the difference. Anyway, after about an hour meeting, it was like, can you live with 24, right? And they were like, yes, we're not going to carry a flag for you and give you a ring endorsement, but we're not going to fight you on it. So as a team, we decided that probably 75 or 80% of the folks that do this do less than 25 in a 12-month period, and we would be able to help those people. Now, there's some of us that do a lot more, and then we have to fall under the regulations of using an RMLO and, you know, other qualifying events. But that's where we're at. So we're trying to get back some release to where you're not having to measure up to the big boys just because you do 6 in a year. I mean, 24, that's only 2 a month, right? So, but for a lot of you, you buy a note, as we just went through with the case study, you create seller financing to exit your way out of it. 24 probably works for the majority of the folks in this room. So that's what we're trying to get done. You know, we'd like to say repeal Dodd-Frank and give us all where we're back. Everybody's realistic. That's not going to happen, right? So we try to make the case. And what really resonates, and Jeff, I kind of want you to speak to this, is when we go into the offices, we don't usually tell a lot of stories about how it impacts the real estate investors. We focus on how it impacts the consumers and the potential homeowners. And a lot of folks that are in districts that are deprived of capital, like inner city Chicago and places like that, they realize private capital is what's going to help them. And that has really resonated. So Glenn, I know you've got a lot to say on that too. And I'll let you and Jeff talk about that, and then we'll let Eddie kind of chime in.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, that's the point I was going to make earlier, is that the consumer, the lower price consumer. I know in Houston, there's neighborhoods that, you know, were basically vacant or just rental property, and seller financiers go in and they buy these houses, they spend the money, they bring them up to code. They've got somebody that's in an apartment, their kids are playing on an asphalt parking lot, and they're able to own a home. And it's a frame home like my wife and I started with, or whatever, and it works. It's good for the consumer. And I want to make another point, if I can, that you mentioned bipartisan support, and one of the congressmen or congresswoman is Sheila Jackson Lee, and early on, when we told her about it, you know, about what we were dealing with, she said, you shouldn't have to be licensed, maybe registered. And I say, we don't have any problem with that. It's not that we're having to get licensed, it's just that we're having to get licensed for something that we're not doing. We're not a bank. My sister was a compliance officer in a bank, full time, and she eventually resigned because it was so much stress. So how's a private investor that's providing houses supposed to be in compliance, complete compliance?
So a story that I will frequently tell to members of Congress and their staff and legislative directors is that we as real estate investors who are seller financing a deal, we're a whole lot easier to work with should a borrower have a car accident, get laid off, whatever, because they can deal with us almost on a face-to-face basis or through a servicer here in the United States rather than going through a call center in Mumbai or Manila and going through the Wells Fargo or Bank of America wonderful loss mitigation process. Once again, another joke that didn't get off the stage. So, you know, and as I explain that to them, you know, and I tell the story in my personal business that I have borrowers that telegraph me, you know, come see me right around Christmas time going, hey, we just got laid off for the next 2 months. We'll catch up on tax refund, you know, come early March. And I'm like, hey, you told me in advance, we're good. And then I look at the member of Congress and I go, show me how Wells Fargo can do that. I love beating on Wells Fargo, in case you're wondering. So that's that story. And Matt, I want to go back to one point that you and Eddie were talking about. What does it say for our industry if when we get this win? What does that say for us as far as having a presence at the table going forward? I want you to address that so everybody in the audience can appreciate the magnitude of that.
Sure. And I'll ask you guys your opinion on this too. But so when we first got started out 4 years ago, and I think anyone who's heard me talk has heard this before, we had to educate people as to what the hell seller financing was. The first 24 meetings that we all did together, not one person who had helped write Dodd-Frank and regulate seller financing had any idea what seller financing was. So we literally had to walk them through what a seller finance deal looked like, how they worked. You know, Bob got out his crayons and drew some lines around, and really it was as rudimentary as talking to kids in first and second grade because they had absolutely no idea what we were talking about. After about a year, the realtors, the community bankers, the mortgage brokers, and the American bankers started hearing a lot about seller financing and what we were doing on the Hill. And that's when we got called to the principal's office by the big boys and the big girls in the room, and they tried to take us to the woodshed. And I told the guys going in there, hey, good news is they know who the hell we are now, Bad news is they know who the hell we are now, and they're paying attention to what we're doing. Interestingly enough, in that room, as Bob said, you know, the big industries, their basic retort when Congressman Williams said, well, why are you opposing this piece of legislation for this small industry that's seeking relief from a bill that I wasn't here to legislate on, but I'd like to repeal from the roots. But some of the people in this room actually supported it. And their retort was, as Bob said, well, if we live under it, they have to live under it. And Roger Williams slammed his fist on the table and said, that's what got us here. It's the attitude like that got us here. They want relief. Why can't they get relief? You guys are coming to me every day asking for relief of the same bill, and then you're going to tell me that seller financing can't get relief because you're living under a bill that some of you in this room supported? All their heads went down. That's when I knew we'd won that argument, but that we had gotten their attention enough that they were watching very closely what we were doing with our piece of legislation. While they haven't helped us, they haven't hurt us, I believe, to our faces, but I'm not certain that they haven't thrown boulders down the hill at us without taking credit for those boulders coming down the hill. And make no mistake about it, we are up against, you know, some of the biggest businesses in the world, some of the biggest businesses certainly in this country. And even though they don't necessarily get impacted by us, they don't want us to flourish easily either. So we have our work cut out for us. And I do believe the big difference, Jeff, to your point, is when members of the Seller Finance Coalition come in and talk. Interestingly enough, just like you were just talking about right before we came on stage. I don't know if the gentleman that did that deal is still here, but he had the same conversation with his, the homeowner that we're talking about, where homeowners having trouble making the payments. So he was able to work something out with them. You don't get that type of service at Wells Fargo. When we talk about we're a little industry wearing a white hat trying to do good things for our customers, we do get a receptive audience. Yep. And there's no better person to deliver that message than the people, the men and women in this room. You know, and one of the things I'd like to remind small business people is when you poll the American people who they trust the most in public life, meaning different industries, different careers, firefighters are number one. And let's be honest, they should be. They run into burning buildings when everybody else is running out. But small businesses are number two, and they're close behind. Small businesses make communities. And I'm sure everybody in this room does a lot in their own personal community. At our dinner last night, what you all do for that group up in that county is tremendous. But the goodwill that these small businesses are building are something that we need to take advantage of. We need to be proud of what we're doing. And the more people that we have coming to Washington, D.C. or meeting with their legislators back home, the much more likely it is that we're going to be successful. Because I think everybody in this room has a good story to tell. But if you're not telling it, then legislators don't know it. And when we've told that story, I think we've changed some hearts and minds. Even somebody like Sheila Jackson Lee, when we walked into the office, was like, I don't like these guys. They're probably taking advantage of somebody. But once we walked her through what we were doing, she's like, wait a second, you shouldn't be going through this. You should be registered, not getting licenses. And she said, people in my community are having trouble accessing capital. You guys sound like the type of people that are going to let them get to that capital. Yes, we would if you would allow us. So we need to be proud and loud about what you're doing. We need more help. We need more reinforcements, quite frankly, across the country. Congress, if you look at Congress today, before the election on Tuesday, 60% of this Congress has been elected in the last 4 years. After Tuesday, that's going to be 70 to 80% of totally new people in the last 6 years that are coming to Congress. That's a great opportunity, but it means a lot of work for us to go out there and educate them. And, you know, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but there is other folks watching what we're doing, paying attention to what we're doing, and they are trying to put their thumb down on us as much as they possibly can. That being said, I think we can beat them because we have a better story to tell. At the end of the day, what lobbying and advocating really is all about is who has a better story to tell. I'd rather tell our story than their story, but we need help telling it.
Well, and let me talk a little bit about something that we feel like as just people in the seller finance industry. Glenn and I have known each other since the 80s. Bob and I have certainly known each other since the late 80s. Jeff, you're not far behind it. And we've all been in the industry, and this is our life, and it's what we've done. It's what your kids do, and it's what I want my kids to do. And my father-in-law and you did a lot of business together. And I mean, we just come from the lineage of the business. The luckiest thing we ever did was find him. I mean, straight
Amen.
up.
Amen.
That we would not even be in a conversation had we not found you. And honest to God, you worked way too cheap and almost for free for several years because you believe in our cause. Now, you run a business and you need to get paid. We get that. But you have adopted our cause, and you were credible with the right guys. He walks us into Roger Williams' office, and Roger Williams is a congressman from Weatherford, Texas, just about 30 miles west of Fort Worth. And Roger has carried our flag, and Roger doesn't sell or finance property. He just thought it was an injustice that real estate investors couldn't help people. And so you have led us in the right doors, and you give us great advice. Here's 2 or 3 things that we learned. I don't know that we intuitively knew this, but Matt made sure that we absolutely understood it. When you're dealing with somebody in public office, telling them you're not making as much money as you used to, whether they're Democrat or Republican, that's just not going to fall on the ears that you would expect, right? They need to hear how the working class people, the people that elect them, how they're affected. And the reality is that seller financing provides affordable housing for people that otherwise wouldn't get a house. The second property that you just saw Tim and Ellen do, that guy qualifies for an FHA loan, but he cannot get an FHA loan because he has a current FHA loan with a divorced wife living in the house. So he's out. He doesn't get a house, except Tim and Ellen were in a position to offer owner financing to him. So that's a classic example of seller financing provides home ownership to otherwise people that wouldn't have home ownership, and that clearly needs to be our message. And just know that we want to work with you and help you as you help us do this. And the messaging that Matt has helped guide us with, which has been very effective. Bob's made more trips to D.C. and been in more offices than any of all of us, and we've all been up there a lot. And your messaging was accurate, and your advice has been accurate to us. So first of all, I want you guys to give him a hand because he has supported our industry.
Thank you. Thanks.
And so, I think we honestly, we surprised people. We're just a little bitty coalition, and we're obviously trying to gain support with all you guys, which makes us a lot bigger, by the way. And we're just a little bitty coalition, but the truth of the matter is people are kind of surprised at this little bitty coalition. We started out with about 4 guys, went up there and actually got to the point of getting a bill on the table and financial services and moving through the process. And there's little log jams, and we could spend the next 3 hours talking about, well, this happened almost except for this and whatever. And you've been just good at guiding us through, this is how it works. But I wanted to leave here, Matt, today with a point of execution for all these guys. I want to make sure that they are clear that we have stayed in this fight not because it looked like we were going to lose, but because it did look like we were going to win. And so I wanted you to kind of guide us through how you see a call to action, what that looks like, what the progression is you'd like to see everybody in the room act on.
The biggest thing that we need help with, quite frankly, is getting more support from Democrat members of Congress. And we have met with dozens and dozens, and most of them feel like we have a pretty good case to make, but you got to go talk to Maxine because we only do what Maxine tells us to do. She does financial services, she's in charge, and without her blessing, we're not going to cross her. A couple of them have, to their credit, because they believed strongly enough in our cause. So I do think, talking about the customer and about the good work that we do we shouldn't be afraid to go into any office. And we do need to target more Democrats. And no matter what happens on Election Day next week, there will be more Democrats in the House. Whether or not they take control remains to be seen, but there will definitely be more. And we can't be afraid to go in those offices and explain to them how we're helping their constituents get access to capital, have the dream of home ownership, which, let's be honest, without a home in this country, it's really hard to acquire wealth. They understand that. So we need to get a little bit more aggressive and going into these offices and promoting the industry to them.
So I was going to make a suggestion there. So all of you guys that have seller finance people, and you've given them home ownership, and they live in a certain zip code, why don't you look, and they would be so willing to either write a letter, do a video, or even write a letter to a congressman that you could help them with. They obviously need to sign it. It needs to be legit. Or even craziness if you could get them to get in the car with you and go to the congressman's office. So look in the district, right?
Yep.
Look in the district where that borrower lives and see if that borrower has a Democratic congressperson. Now that would be money right there, right? That's somebody that has benefited from the ability to offer seller financing.
And if you go to our website and put in a zip code, it will tell you who your member of Congress is and who your senator is. And as Eddie said, he's dead on. Right now, Democrats are worth more than Republicans because we have twice as many Democrats supporting us now as we did before, but we need more. And at some point, we're going to need to go into Maxine Waters' office and have a very healthy debate with her about the benefits of what we're talking about. So anybody in California in particular, if you're doing business in her district would be great, but if you're not, she's close to a lot of the Democrats in that state delegation. So if you're doing business in California, you live in California, you know folks that are doing it, put them in touch with us because they're very valuable right now. I do believe at some point we will have a conversation pretty soon with Maxine, and maybe before the end of this year, where we're going to have an opportunity to compromise with her and get something done. If it's not this year, it'll be next year. So the more people that she's hearing from the customer side of the ledger, the better, because quite frankly, that's where she's going to be more concerned. And having folks in poor communities, inner city communities, talking to their members of Congress, just like Eddie said about the opportunity that has been afforded. And why shouldn't somebody else in my family be afforded the same opportunity? These people want to do more of these. They want to have more opportunity in my community to give home ownership, but the government's standing in the way. Help them, help us. If they could deliver that message, it's going to be listened to.
So here's some simple execution tips. First, the most powerful thing you could do is load them up and take them in the car to the congressman's office, right? Most powerful. Second most powerful would probably be a video. Third most powerful would be a letter, and if you could do a video, you could just have it transcribed, and you could at least do it in a letter.
Yep.
Get your person to sign it. So once again, number one most powerful thing is to find somebody that has benefited from seller financing that is in a Democratic congressman's district and get them to say what seller financing has done for them, right? That would be like, we don't mean that we don't want your money, right? And we don't mean that we don't want you to come to D.C., to our fly-in and participate with us. We want all of those things. Trust me, I want everybody there on that side of the ledger with us as well. But if you would take the extra effort to realize the power of some customers that you have, this would make Matt's job a lot easier.
And I'm a resource. If you need me to talk to the customer, walk them through it, walk them through the legislation and how it does have stringent consumer protections in it, I'm happy to do it. So just get in touch with me through the website or through Bob or Eddie anytime, and we'll talk to whoever. I was telling somebody last night, I'm willing to get on a plane in certain places like Alabama. If we have some people that could help us in Alabama, we're this close to getting Senator Jones to be the Democratic lead on our Senate bill with Senator Cotton. If we could get 2 or 3 people in Alabama to talk to him, I think we would get him. And having a
I'll
bill
get
in
that.
both the House and the
Matt,
Senate really puts
I'll get
us-
that done.
Okay, that'd be great.
I'll get that done. Because last time I was at your office, I left there to go right to Alabama with 150 people in the room.
Excellent.
I'll get some of them to do it.
I was hoping to go to
So
Alabama.
just to kind of wrap things up, I mean, the magic is hearing from their constituents, right? Whether you're the business owner, whether you're the consumer, that's what has the most impact. The Democrats that Matt referred to that have crossed over and helped us, you know, even though they may fear what Maxine would say, knew it was best for the people in their district, right? And sometimes, to be totally honest, I spend a lot of time up there. Sometimes that gets overlooked in ways people vote on both sides. They know it might be best for their district back home, but they're getting pressure from everybody else not to vote that way.
But particularly, Bob, if they're not hearing from people from their district, it makes
Right.
it easy.
Absolutely. So if they hear from them, and you don't have, to Eddie's point, we have an annual fly-in. It'll be in the spring. Everybody will be invited. We usually have between 40 and 50 people go to offices, but you don't have to wait for that. Everybody has an office back in their district. You just need to go see them there. They have staff there if they're not there, and a lot of times, especially now during campaign season, they're probably by that office once or twice a week. So you can find a way to get in front of your congressman or your senator and just tell the story. If you need help in how to tell the story, you can go to sellerfinancecoalition.org. You can give us a call. We can connect you. We can give you pretty much a transcript on what your email should say. There's a booth down in the exhibit hall for the Seller Finance Coalition. A couple handouts that explain the bill and stuff like that. Feel free to grab one and look it over. And, you know, it's very interesting when you start getting involved in the politics, especially if I'm a news junkie. I watch TV all the time. You hear about gridlock, you kind of roll your eyes, you move on to the next thing. But when you're actually trying to get something accomplished that means a lot to you, you understand the people's frustrations.
Yeah. So let's talk about a couple things before we leave. Bob, talk about them joining the Seller Finance Coalition. We do have a meeting tomorrow for those of you that live in Texas, and we've built a special organization for Texas people called the Texas 100. And that's a commitment level for not every operator, but it's $1,000 per year commitment for 3 years, and that money is split equally between our group. We're both in the same group. I don't mean to sound like we're not, but the Seller Finance Coalition and then the Texas Land Developer Association has dealt with the state level. So that's for Texas people, and obviously if you're in Texas, we'd like for you to consider that. And then otherwise, we need every one of you guys to be a member with us. So let's talk about how to get that done.
Well, first of all, on the Texas 100, to Eddie's point, not only do we have this national issue with federal regulations, but every state's got different things too. Jeff made a comment earlier that it all started in Ohio and he had to deal with that, and I don't think it's gone away. I mean, you might win one battle, then another battle comes up.
It pops up in another state.
Right. So our breakout tomorrow is entitled the Texas 100 Roundtable. But what we were able to do is we created this, we'll call it a model of recruiting people on a level to help both state and national. But what we're trying to do is to take that model so that you can plug and play it in different states. So you don't have to be from Texas to come hear that. We have set it up now with websites and text messaging and everything to where it's plug and play to do it in Ohio. It's plug and play in Arkansas. So if you're interested in that, feel free to come to that session. It's not just about Texas. We're going to tell you how the model developed. Mitch Stephen was very instrumental in creating that, and he's put a lot of effort into the website and to make it duplicatable. Is that a word?
Yep.
Look at that. That's a Kevin Moore word. Okay. So anyway, we're going to do that. If you want to join the coalition, there's various levels. There's grassroots at $250. Then it goes up from there all the way up to sponsors, especially for the fly-in. We don't have the exact date of the fly-in, but it's usually in March or April. Right? One time we did it in July, and it was just, it was really too hot. So we decided that wasn't a good thing. But we split up and we go to offices. We'll send you to your representative's office and we'll send you to other offices too. So we spend a day and a half. We usually hear from 6 or 8 representatives and senators. And then we kind of spend the next day on the Hill walking around and just telling our story. So we'd love to have you do that. Any other call to action? Jeff, I know you like to wrap things up with a little call to action.
Yeah.
Why don't you just make the letter part of your closing package?
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mitch
Stevens with a great idea that next time you sell an owner finance house, have the letter going to the members of Congress and the United States Senator in those states to be part of the closing package, that your borrower sign it. Basically
Yep,
saying,
great
hey,
idea.
I get a house because of seller financing. Brilliant idea, Mitch. Brilliant.
Just
Mitch,
don't jump off the stage, so go ahead.
I was already thinking of all that, Mitch.
Give that man a beer.
I could feel it over here, Mitch. I could just feel it.
Yeah, you're a little late. No, I'm also thinking, we have a lot of customers that walk in and make payments, and maybe have a form letter that when they come in, to ask them to write a letter.
Right.
You know, they might be reluctant to do that.
You're going to probably need to help them construct the letter, right, Matt? But there's nothing wrong with that, and they don't.
We have
like-
samples that we'll send you that are pretty basic. You know, it's just basically,
Yeah.
I own a home because seller financing, and I'd like other people to have the opportunity to do it as well.
All right, so call to action. Number one is, can you get a borrower that has benefited from seller financing to let a lawmaker know the benefit they got, right? The Republicans are great and Democrats are more greater, right?
Yep.
Way more greater,
Yep.
right? So that's number one. Obviously, we want to get you guys involved. We have found out over and over and over that we find people that had a cousin that's in Arkansas. They don't live in Arkansas, but my cousin is, and he was involved in big business, and he knows tons of lawmakers there. And we found that over and over. So just use your creed juices here to figure out the connectivity that Matt needs to get the connection that makes it work. Matt's obviously, driving us in the direction that we need to go. So we're very blessed that Jeff came on and brought in National RIA. Just a lot of good things have happened to us, and we just want to keep the momentum going.
Can I ask a couple of questions to conclude?
Sure.
How many people in the audience are in the seller finance business or want to be in the seller finance business? How many people in the audience think that you're in a good business? How many people would like to do 8 times as many seller finance deals in a year? So that's what we're talking about. We need your help promoting your businesses and the good work that you're doing, and hopefully we can help increase your ability to do that business by 8 times. Not a lot of other things going on in your lives right now that could help increase your business by 8 times. So it's going to take a little bit of time and effort from you, but if we're successful, it's going to pay off in a big way.
Great.
All right, let's thank the panel. Moderator, appreciate it. All right.
I kind of feel like you moderated. Stole my moderating.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. I know it seems like we just got back from lunch, but not only do we have great comfort food at lunch, but we're going to have some ice cream during our break. Now, how cool is that, right? All right. Now, let me give you an idea of what we got coming up. We have 3 sessions when we get back. How many people out there have self-directed IRA? Most of you? Okay, we got our self-directed IRA panel coming up. Martha's going to be up here with, we've got Nathan Long from Quest. We're going to have Jeff Watson back up here. We got Jack Kiley from Mid-Atlantic, Glenn Mather from New View, and Travis Majors from IRA Services. So you won't want to miss that. That's always a fun panel. Then you guys just met Mitch Stephen. He's going to come talk about owner finance. And then I'm going to wrap up the day with a capital markets panel with some other capital fund managers up here. And we're going to talk about what we see going on in the market, especially coming into 2019 from an inventory flow. And then at 5:30, thanks to our sponsor, FCI, we'll have our welcome reception cocktail party down in the exhibit hall. But right now, the ice cream break is brought to you by Fowler Financial. They have a booth. Be sure to thank Cody and Leanne for being a sponsor. Enjoy your ice cream. Just keep in mind, if you're not hungry and you don't want ice cream, that's okay, because I get all the leftovers, and I'm okay with that, okay? All right, so you want to be back at 3 o'clock for the self-directed IRA panel.